biennium, Multnomah County is currently receiving $55 million to serve folks who are experiencing homelessness. And that's a variety of things. That's not just shelter. I will be honest, I was dismayed by the approach that Multnomah County took. I know there's a budget deficit. I don't think it's appropriate to come out of the gate and ask for an amount of money, not only from the state, but from Metro, without previous conversations. What I'm going to want to see from the county is very specific indications about what they are doing throughout their budget to prioritize homeless services in the county. They're going to have to make some hard decisions. It should not be incumbent upon the state to fill in all the gaps. So we have a lot of conversations to have there. Clearly, I understand how important it is for Multnomah County to have the resources to serve the folks who are on the streets right now. We just need to have better, more specific conversations about what their budget situation is and what role the state should play, and Metro and the city. So we'll be working on that in the coming week to talk with them about that. We need to figure it out. I was in Washington, D.C. last week, the White House that has gained some national notoriety. I will say that the National Governors Association is a bipartisan group of governors who come together to work on shared interests. The business meeting at the White House is a standing tradition. This is be the third time I have attended that meeting as governor. And it started off very well. I think there was good collaboration with cabinet secretaries who were in the White House having meetings with small groups of governors to talk about a variety of things. I think there was a commitment from those cabinet secretaries to try to hear what concerns governors have, Republican and Democrat, and try to assure them that they would work on issues. We were having very constructive conversations, and then we walked into the meeting and listened to President Trump for more than an hour. I thought him calling out Governor Mills from Maine was, I was extremely disappointed. I think it broke the tenor of the day. I think there was a lot of constructive conversation. And I support where Governor Mills is in standing up for the rule of law in her state and protecting the folks of her state. And it really was very disappointing about the whole turn of events there. One of the things I did bring up in my meetings with federal officials was the need for stability and clarity of the things that the federal administration is doing, whether it's funding streams or federal workforce, what's happening for folks in their jobs. We have a lot of federal land in the state of Oregon. We have a lot of folks who serve primarily rural communities who work for the federal government. One of the things I raised particularly with the Trump administration, with the Secretary of Energy, was my concern about staffing at the Bonneville Power Administration, because we need to make sure that we have trained, experienced people to maintain the grid that BPA runs. It's important for the entire Pacific Northwest. I made that request to him directly to check into that. Constructive conversations last week, or at least an opportunity to express from Oregon what we need to see from the Trump administration. More stability, more clarity, and addressing some issues that I think will have very real impacts to Oregonians, particularly rural parts of our state. Moving on to legislative issues. If you haven't seen it, there was a press release today from the Department of Forestry with further clarification on the pause on the appeals on the wildfire maps. I want to make sure we don't disadvantage anyone who's in the appeals process under the current wildfire maps. So we're pausing the referral on the appeals process until the legislature can take up the conversation. Legislators are expressing interest that we might have to change the law. They might have to change the law as it relates to the wildfire maps, so we need to have some time there. So ODF put out a little notice there because there was some confusion of what that meant. And I believe next week we'll be hearing from the Wildfire Funding Group and Committee about their report on different ways for the state to consider having ongoing sustainable funding to not only do wildfire suppression in the state, but also to help our communities be more resilient by providing resources for hardening and other things that communities need around the state. So we'll be watching that. And then lastly, on transportation package, There's been a lot of good conversation about accountability with the Oregon Department of Transportation. That's not a surprise to me. I've been working since I came into this office. I have added 3 new commissioners to the Oregon Transportation Commission. I have asked specifically for updated methodologies and reports on major projects so we can get better clarity and alignment on what these projects are actually going to cost to complete, particularly in the metro area. And I've worked with the director to request an external review of how they estimate projects so we can improve on time and on budget delivery of major projects. There is certainly work to do. I look forward to sitting down with Senator Bruce Starr and talking about some of his ideas. I totally embrace accountability when in any area of state government, and certainly in the area of transportation where it's a lot of money for very important projects. We have to make sure the agency is doing everything they can to be transparent and clear about the work they're doing. That does not take away from the fact that we need to fund the Oregon Department of Transportation to do their job, so we can have maintenance and safe roads and finish projects that Oregonians are depending on. So lots of good conversation there, and look forward to seeing where that conversation goes with the legislature in the next couple weeks. So with that, happy to take some questions.
Yeah, there was a American Education Research report that's going to be presented to lawmakers next week. I'm sure you've seen some of the media reports on it as well. Curious to hear your thoughts on that and the amount of money that it's estimating it's going to cost to fully reach Oregon's goals for education.
Yep, I've only seen the high-level news on that study. I think my immediate response is that report, I don't believe, connects resources, money to outcomes. I think we, as a state, are about middle of the pack in terms of our per pupil funding, but we are at the bottom of the pack in terms of our outcomes. So what I'm focusing on is the budget that I've put forward in my recommended budget for our schools, and making sure we have increased accountability to make sure the dollars are actually, providing the outcomes we want for our students. So there'll be a bill coming out in a couple weeks on that regard. And I think the national study, frankly, isn't very helpful right now. What's helpful is getting a good state school fund budget passed and putting new accountability measures connected to it.
The study was commissioned by your own lawmakers in the state, and it also looks at the funding streams and how they're divvied up through the districts, looking at specifically Oregon's cap on students with a disability and their funding. It shows that 70% students with a disability are getting funded at the same level as all other students in Oregon. What did you think about that, and are any changes recommended based on that?
Well, I think on the disability cap, it is something I looked at as whether or not I could make any changes in my recommended budget, and when it came down to it, I had to have a balanced budget, so I wasn't able to move the cap in my budget. I understand the need for that, so I know a lot of education stakeholders are talking with the legislature right now about that. That still does not replace the idea that of the resources that are going into our districts, not only the state school fund, but Student Success Act dollars need to produce better outcomes, and that's what the conversation will be with our school districts.
I mean, the report's showing...
I don't think it's just about the money. Money is not the answer. We need to have adequate resources, but we have to have resources, because we have districts in the state with resources comparatively to other districts are doing a much better job.
Happy to follow up
I have a
after.
question from Antonio Sanchez with
Thank
the
you.
TCS Northwest. Last week, Pam Bondi sued New York over its immigration laws. Bondi said the following: "If you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready." How is Oregon preparing for a potential lawsuit from the federal government over sanctuary laws?
I'm not familiar with the case in New York, so I don't know if there are specifics to the suit that they filed there. Here in Oregon, we have had clear delineation of the role of local law enforcement and federal immigration enforcement under our sanctuary laws in the state of Oregon. We've had them since the 80s. We have very clear communication with our federal partners about what they can do and what we can do. I have not seen anything specific, and we will just, if we do receive something specific from the Trump administration, we'll analyze it, and I'll have a conversation with the Attorney General about it. Right now, we're following our law, and federal immigration officials are doing whatever they need to do.
Go ahead, Julie. So with the next economic forecast coming out in a couple days, and continued uncertainty over both federal funding and some of the economic or revenue impacts of federal decisions, is anything changing with your recommended budget? Is there anything that you're looking to pull back from what you want the legislature to do?
Right now, I'm cautioning our budget writers and our legislative leaders to not overreact. We certainly have needs in our state. We should focus on our own budget process. I think it's going to be quite a while before we understand the full impact of any potential restrictions on federal funding. Right now, we are just analyzing what we're seeing from the Trump administration, but I can't say today what we think is going to happen. So right now, we need to focus on passing a budget that meets the state's needs. I don't think we need to put any additional money in reserve, more than we would normally do, but we'll have to watch the situation.
I have a question from Holly with Ashland News. Governor Kotek, thank you for taking my question. How are you and your administration working with local superintendents and school boards on a statewide response to President Trump's executive order to eliminate DEI programs? How has the approach changed since a U.S. district judge in Baltimore blocked the executive order over the weekend?
Well, again, right now, we've been providing guidance to school districts under current practice. We believe that activities in our school districts follow non-discrimination law. We don't believe we're breaking any federal laws with the work we're doing. And again, until we have specific requests from the federal government on specific funding streams, we are just following business as usual at this point.
Thank you, Governor. I was going to ask another follow-up question about Multnomah County in regards to the homeless services budget shortfall. You know, they are forecasting up to $100 million in reductions between the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year, 2026. I know that some of this was surprising to you, this ask, but the state is promising resources, in the legislature. But what does this say about how the county is continuing to handle the homeless crisis? I know you said you want to work with them, you want to have conversations, but it seems like this conversation is had a lot with county leaders. Are you confident that they can manage this moving forward?
I think I would differentiate between their budget challenge and the way they rolled out the budget challenge. I think you have to sit down with folks before you put out a press statement that you have a massive budget hole and we're asking other people to help us fill it. I did have a conversation with the chair about them having a budget deficit. Not surprising, there are a lot of factors that are leading to that. What the county needs to do, someone who's been through very difficult budget discussions in the past when there have been revenue downfalls or downturns, is assessing everything across the county of what they do right now and prioritizing every dollar they can to serve the most vulnerable, which are folks who are experiencing homelessness and folks who need behavioral health, mental health, and addiction services. I want to know from the chair that that's what they're doing before they come to us asking for additional dollars. So I think we need more transparency from Multnomah County about what budget assumptions they're making to come up and ask for more money.
We got a question from Buffy with the Rogue Valley Times. We are hoping to hear about how the governor is responding to federal funding freezes, and in particular, hear your thoughts on the recent United States Forest Service and Parks cuts to federal employees' jobs, and how that'll impact the state over the summer and during summer wildfires. Will the state try to allocate funds to restore some of those positions?
Right now, I've been very clear with the federal administration that we need them to restore some of the things that they have paused and to reassess some of their staffing cuts. When I was meeting with the USDA Secretary, Brooke Rollins, at the White House, I did specifically bring up grants around wildfire mitigation. We have some folks who are already ready to and hired up to do fuel removal on the landscape to prepare for the fire season. Those grants need to go forward. I got assurance that they are reviewing those. We talked about, and not only me, but other Western governors who all have wildfire issues, and their seasons have started technically, and so they want to make sure that the hiring actually does happen. That was expressed directly to the secretaries in charge. I think it was heard. I hope they're going to reassess that. It will be very difficult for us to be ready for the fire season without full partnership from the federal government. My understanding from those meetings is that they are reassessing, and I hope they do that quickly. It will have an impact on our rural communities.
Hey, Governor, there was a report last week that suggested the Trump administration is going to be potentially detaining immigrants in military outposts around the country. Oregon was mentioned as some place that's on their agenda. I called your office. They said they didn't know. I could ask the military department. Have you talked to the military department about what this could mean, what facilities are in play? Like, any clue what this is?
That is, to be honest, that's the first time hearing of it. I have not had any conversations with anybody, and not with the general at the military department. So.
Okay. Well, if you do ask him, and you could let us know if there's any truth to this, we'd be very, very interested.
You know, I think what's interesting about that is Oregon, unlike other states, we have a relatively low presence of Department of Defense facilities. So I think it's unlikely that they'd be looking at us, but we can certainly check into it.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, you mentioned the wildfire maps and your action and clarity around it, and that as lawmakers, figure it out on their own, at least some Republicans have suggested wanting that appeal deadline also pushed to June. Is that something you're considering, or can we anticipate anything further on your end as stuff unfolds?
Not at the moment. I believe the pause that I asked the agency to follow was what I am allowed to do under the law. It will be up to the legislature to change what was Senate Bill 762 from the 2021 session, which established the maps and the process. So it really is on their plate to figure out where we go next. I just wanted to make sure we could provide a little bit of time so no one was getting into an appeals process that could change. So that's what we are able to do at the moment.
I have a question from Claire Rush with the Associated Press. Is Oregon seeing an increase in unemployment claims from the federal firings?
I don't know. I haven't seen any numbers to suggest that yet. But I will say, like other governors, if we have folks who are leaving federal employment and you have talent you would like to bring to the state of Oregon, we would love to hear from you.
You decided to put the Oregon Youth Authority head on leave. How involved is your office in this investigation into the backlog of cases? What role is your office playing, and what else can you share about how that is unfolding?
We have been briefed. There's an ongoing investigation. We're not actively involved in that. The investigation of the officer that handles complaints. It's an open investigation, so I'll just leave it at that.
But you and your office decided to put Joe and Leary on leave. That was your decision.
Yes, I want to make sure that the investigation can move forward unimpeded, and at this point, it made the most sense to have an interim director while the investigation proceeds.
Yes, I got one. Sorry, a lot of texts coming in. Everybody on virtual. Jake with the Lund Report. Has the governor heard anything about the Trump administration approving the hospital provider tax for Medicaid funding?
I have not. What we're focused on now is making sure the provider assessment legislation, which is moving through the House, can get done in a timely fashion. Some of my budget assumptions are based on early passage of the bill, so we can have further conversations with CMS at the Department of Health and Human Services. So at this point, we haven't started that conversation because we don't have the bill passed.
I want to make sure everybody gets a chance.
Did you go to Governor's Association dinner with the president on Saturday, and how was that compared to the business meeting?
The First Lady and I actually did not go to Saturday night's dinner, primarily because we were hoping to be home by Sunday, and the flight away is once a day and it's at night, so we came home early. So.
Yeah. Governor Kotek, you had mentioned pushes for transparency and accountability in transportation not being like a big surprise. I was wondering where measures from the previous package might have fallen short, and if you could talk a little bit about that external review that you've mentioned.
I can get you more information on the external review team. I think it's been underway for a couple months, but I don't know the status there, so we can get you more information. But it did become clear in conversations with the director that often it is helpful to have an outside party come in and look at how you're doing business to see if there are any ways to improve. So it's definitely an important thing to do. I think we have had a history of not accurately projecting the cost of major projects, and we have to do a better job there. What was the first part of your question? I'm sorry.
If you had any ideas on how maybe HB 2017 accountability measures fell short.
Well, I think there was good coverage. I did read the piece in this. That's yours. Thank you. In the Statesman Journal. I think it was about following through with the reporting and the transparency on some of the online reporting that should have been done. I'm not going to make excuses for the agency. Obviously, that predates my role as governor. But I've been very clear with Director Strickler that everyone is looking at the agency to be able to have confidence that when a new transportation package is passed, that the resources will see completed projects on time and on budget. And he's completely on board with that. We have to learn from what didn't go well the last time, which is a little bit of that external review conversation as well. So my commitment to legislators is we're doing everything to make sure the agency will be better. We look forward to new things that they would like to layer on there to help us achieve that. Please give us sources to do that. Sometimes these things are done without additional resources for evaluation and tracking. We need to have those things, and we need to get a transportation package done for the safety of our system.
Yes, Lauren Prado from NBC5 or KOBI. What have been your frustrations with the ONA Providence negotiations? With a deal potentially being set in stone, what are your thoughts? Are you hopeful?
Well, I'm losing track of time here. I did have a conversation with the Oregon Nurses Association and Providence after the first tentative agreement was voted down substantially by ONA members. I was very clear with them, we need to resolve this, ask them to get back to the table. Now that there is another tentative agreement, I'm feeling optimistic. My message to them has been, it is important for the state for this to be resolved, to support a healthcare system that's critical for many Oregonians. And they got back to work. We have a tentative agreement. I hope members, we will know today, I believe, if that has been supported by rank and file members of the union. I'm optimistic. I think they got serious on the second time around.
I wanted to touch back on that education report. You pointed out that, we have some of the highest spending with some of the lowest scores. This is true, but some of the increase in spending came, as you know, right before the pandemic. The report specifically says because of those low scores and to get where we want to be with the scores, we'll need to increase spending. It does say that. It also notes that in comparison to other states, Oregon has higher percentages of students with disability and students living in poverty. When you have 17% of students with disability not getting funded or getting funded at the same rate as other students, it might explain some of that discrepancy, but you're saying we're not going to look at that?
Well, at this point, what we are looking at is my recommended budget is a substantial increase in the state school fund. We are asking for more accountability on the student success dollars, which added $1 billion more per year on top of the state school fund numbers. There's not a system in our state that has all the money it needs. I made a commitment to school districts to get the best possible budget for them in my budget, which I did. And now the conversation is, with those dollars, we must better guarantee that there will be increased student outcomes for reading, for math, for attendance. These are very important indicators of success for our students. I think we can, with the resources we have, do a better job, and that's where I'm focusing.
Are you revisiting the formula to distribute that money amongst districts if it's missing, you're missing students with disability?
Currently, I know people are calling for that. That is not on my docket for the session. I'm focused on accountability with the existing funding formulas and resources that we have.
But
One more virtual here.
another question from Noticias Northwest. Ever since President Trump took office, some minority business have told Noticias Northwest that they're seeing less foot traffic over fears that patrons can get arrested by immigration authorities. We know Oregon is a sanctuary state, but it seems like the message is not reaching the vulnerable population effectively. What is your office doing to appease the fear?
There is a lot of fear. The federal administration has been very clear about their goals around deporting undocumented residents. What my office has been trying to do is to be very clear with folks who provide public services what their role is as it relates to our sanctuary laws. Community partners have been working very diligently to help educate communities about what their rights are under the law. At the end of the day, the fear is real. People are staying away from businesses because they do feel immigration enforcement. What I can say to Oregonians is we will uphold our law, and do the best we can under the situation that is coming out of the federal government. But I understand the fear, and that is being stoked by the president and his allies.
All right, we're at 3:30. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Appreciate the time. And of course, if you need anything in between, let us know. So, thanks.